Hello, everybody. My name is Robert Puentes. I'm the president and CEO of the Inhouse Center for Transportation, and I'm really looking forward to this particular session as part of our Transit Costs and Project Delivery Symposium. The purpose of this particular session is to discuss the staff capacity challenges that public sector agencies in the United States are facing when it comes to delivering transit projects. As we all know, some of these transit agencies may only be delivering projects maybe once in a decade or at least very infrequently. We want to get into issues like staff training and size, as well as strategies to build and train a pipeline of project management talent. This is our third day of the symposium, and I can tell you from the sessions that I've been in, this issue of staff capacity has come up very, very frequently, not just here in the United States, but actually increasingly across the world. So we're going to cover the benefits and drawbacks of relying on external consultants, as well as the role of the Federal Transit Administration in evaluating project sponsor capacity. We have a really great panel here, as we have all week, but certainly here today to help us think through these really complicated issues. And I will introduce them just quickly. I believe they're full bios. You can find those in the symposium portal. So let's do alphabetically. So Jim Alexander is the project director for Southwest LRT at Metro Transit. Rick Clark is the former chief program management officer for Los Angeles Metro. And Cory Walker is the acting deputy associate administrator for the Federal Transit Administration's Office of Program Management. Roger Natsuhara is also going to be joining us. He is the chief capital development officer at the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority. He's ran into a little bit of an emergency. He'll be joining us when he can. So we'll welcome him in then. So these excellent panelists are going to discuss the varying elements that contribute to staff capacity and the management skills, resources, and governments that are necessary to build a capable management team to deliver these projects. Again, very common themes we've had come up all throughout the symposium. So please note that after this session is going to be an optimal networking session where folks can get together informally and talk about some of these issues. We've done it for the last couple of days. It's a really interesting way that we could try to replicate that in-person style that you'd get at a regular conference. It's totally optional, but please do join if you can. All these sessions will be recorded and posted, so you can go back and access sessions that you were unable to attend, particularly concurrent sessions. And you can access all of the sessions on the agenda tab to the left on your screen on the Socio platform. After we end this session, you will also be prompted to rate and evaluate this panel. We really encourage you to do that if you can. We certainly do pay attention to all that feedback. It's very valuable to us, so please take the time to offer comments if you're able to do so. And as we go through here today, you can enter questions into the chat, and we will take questions throughout this panel. So let's just jump into the discussion. I'll direct one question to each of the panelists to answer, and then we'll get into more of a more conversational kind of Q&A. So each of you have a background in managing major capital programs, or you oversee project sponsors. So just to start off, please briefly describe your background and your experience in this area. And let's go with the way I introduced you. Let's start with Jim Alexander.
All right. Well, thank you, Robert. Jim Alexander. I'm with Metro Transit in the Twin Cities, state of Minnesota. And I have a professional engineering license within the state here. And my background, I've been with transits for about 21 years now, and I've been project director for the Southwest LRT project. We're currently under construction for about 5 years, but I've been involved in this project since about 2011. Prior to that, I was involved with our last delivery project called the Green Line, formerly Central Corridor, where I was leading the design effort. And prior to that, I was involved in our original line, the Blue Line, for the fare collection piece. So got a lot of familiarity. We work with FTA quite a bit on all these projects as far as the funding, and our local folks as well. And prior to that, I do have consulting experience. Geotechnical engineering is my background. From the Seattle area, and master's from University of Washington, and undergrad civil and from the University of Wyoming. So there you have it.
Thank you for that. Rick.
Yeah, Rick Clark. I have a bachelor's and master's degree in transportation engineering from the University of Pennsylvania. I worked early in my career mainly in the Northeast, Philadelphia, Cleveland, Boston, New York, doing a number of projects mainly involving signal design. I moved on and became, for a consultant, managed the systems integration function for DART's first light rail system in Dallas. I stayed in Dallas for 10 years into their build out program, and moved on to Denver, where I went to manage the T-Rex project for RTD. And that was a great project. That was a combined highway light rail project. It's where I got exposed to how you build a highway project. We had a tremendous team there. We put a group of transit agency and highway people together. People said it could never be done, but it really was a very powerful team where really 2 + 2 = 5. And that was probably my most enjoyable project. But we built that project on time, on budget, no claims. I moved on at RTD to become assistant general manager of their Fast Tracks program. That was a big capital program of, I believe, 5 light rail projects, 3 commuter rail projects, BRT, huge project that's being wrapped up right now. And several of those lines are in service. And in 2015, I moved on to Los Angeles. So I made Coast to Coast. I became Chief Program Management Officer of LA Metro's $20 billion capital program. And again, a very comprehensive, exciting program. I was able to retire and walk away from the stress and the fun at the end of March of this year, and I'm doing some part-time consulting work right now. And thanks, Rob. Thanks for for setting up this symposium and also the report. It's very valuable to the industry.
That's great. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Cory.
All right. Thanks, Rob. Yes, thank you for having me. It's great to be on this panel with these gentlemen. So I'm Cory Walker. I'm the director of the Office of Capital Project Management at FTA headquarters. I have been with FTA for 15 years after I graduated with a mechanical engineering degree at George Washington University. And in that time, the majority of my work has been in the Office of Capital Project Management or in our Region 3 DC Metro office, working on the oversight FTA performs with the major capital projects in the National Capital Region with WMATA and the Dulles Silver Line. Our office is responsible for FTA's nationwide project management oversight program, looking at the FTA-funded major capital projects. Those would be the projects historically over 100 million. We have updated that threshold recently, so projects over 300 million. And it's a large portfolio, an exciting portfolio in places like Minneapolis and LA and Denver, and includes small projects as well in areas that don't have as much experience with major capital projects. And this panel topic today is a critical one for us in our oversight. Our program objectives are built around project management plans, which include the organizational structure, and a key component of our oversight approach is to look at the management capacity and capability of project teams that are undertaking federally funded projects. And it is a challenging area to compete in, particularly if you are doing one of those once in a decade major capital projects. So very happy to be here, and thanks for having me.
No, well, thank you. And thanks for the introduction. And let's stick on that kind of point there, Cory. I think that is, as I said, that's been such a common theme throughout the work that Rick cited, but also throughout the symposium this week. That we've seen, it's just anecdotal, right? But it's come up time and time again that because the construction is so infrequent at certain agencies, whether it's once a decade or every couple of years, it does make it difficult to retain the specialized staff that's needed for projects like this. So what are some ways for project sponsors to build those capable management teams within those constraints? So within the constraints of not having the regular program or having it be very infrequent. Jim, if you can, we'll start with you.
Sure. Well, I can just talk about our experience. We actually had a very good plan coming off the Green Line, which is about a 10-mile new construction between the cities. The intent was to move on to Southwest and then move on to another line. And it was all set to, have people transition from one project to another, work really fine. The challenge is we have delays. We had a freight rail question come up on both the project I'm on another project, the Blue Line extension, and that caused kind of turn everything on its head. So, people that are working for the agency start thinking, well, I'm going to go out. I'm going to go elsewhere, and because I don't want to wait for something, there's better opportunity out there, and so it's a challenge to keep folks within the agency working. Now, I find that some come back, they'll go out to consultant, and they'll once that next project starts picking up, they will come back. They're interested, but we have difficulty with consultant pay is going to be typically more than what the agency can pay. Of course, we have the benefit. We have a free bus pass, so it does entice some folks, but not many. But we can't really compete in that sector. It's really got to be people that are interested in working for an agency. They know what it takes to do that. A lot of politics involved compared to consulting world, and it's just a challenge. So I think as we're working through these projects, we really try to keep retention and keep people interested in the projects. But I'll say for working on this project since 2011, there's no one left from that original batch that was started working on this project, because people are just there's a burnout. And things go right. Central Corridor went really well and is on target. We had good retainage there, but there's still some filter going out in the private sector. So it's a real challenge. I just want to take a lot of time here, but we partner with MnDOT, the DOT, and counties and cities when we can to really help out with that, because we can't do it alone with our agency. And sometimes folks go within the Met Council, which is my parent company, the organization, and then they'll come back to these type of projects.
That gets to actually something I was going to ask you. So you when you lose people, to whom do you lose them to? The private sector mostly, or are they just in and around the public transportation sphere?
Sure, it's a combination. They may go off. We had someone just went over to DOT. We've had people go to the county, but we also have people going out to consultant. And actually, back to the contractor, we have a guy that just left. He came from the construction industry, and he came to us, and he was really good. But he's kind of like, I've had enough of this. I want to go out and work for the contractor again. So it's a combination of all.
And not unique, for sure.
Right.
Rick, same to you.
Yeah, as Jim said, it's a tough thing. The ideal world is we build one project at a time, and the second one dovetails after the first, and it never seems to happen that way. There's either a gap, or in both Denver and Los Angeles, the public didn't want to decide that they didn't want to prioritize one corridor over another. So their demand on the agency is build it all at once, which means bringing in a lot of resources in a short amount of time. Agencies should try to factor that into their schedule. Usually they don't, though. It's more political as to when projects get built, rather than saying, well, we're not going to build them around your convenience, Rick. We want these projects now. And that's a tough thing. There's got to be, I think, on these projects, just realistically, there's got to be a major recruitment, because you're just not, as Jim said, it's just hard to keep these people for a long time. And if there's a gap, even if the agency wants to keep them, a lot of people are going to leave, because they don't want to be sitting around. These are usually very dynamic people, and they want to be engaged on a big, challenging project. But I know on the projects I came to, it was just so helpful, because I came from the outside, to have people who understood the nature of that agency, how to get things done within an agency. It's not always clear. It's done different ways. And it's, who's the public utilities, the utility people in the city. you got to get to know them. The public works people, when you just have to have a core who have worked with these people over time, and it's very worthwhile to keep those people and do the best, but not always possible, and it is a big challenge.
Yeah, indeed. This might be a rudimentary question, but if you, for agencies that may not have consecutive projects, is there a way to keep those people on staff even if you wanted to and have them do something else for a little while, and then can you repurpose them, or is it just that they come in and out when there's construction work to be done?
Yeah, some do get repurposed. There's engineering to support the operation and maintenance. That's always an ongoing thing. You can get them involved in the planning for future studies. Sometimes that will keep them interested and keep them at the agency. But again, the agency has to commit to doing that, because when times are tight and finances are tough, that's basically an overhead cost that the agency has to bear. And like I say, a lot of the people, they got a great resume after they've worked on these big projects, and consultants are going to come after them, recruiters are going to come after them. So some people you'll retain, but others, again, it just, I think any big project, unless you get that perfect dovetailing, is going to have to deal with some recruitment.
I just want to add to that. Rick was talking about, it kind of comes to mind. It takes a certain person to be able to work in a project office setting. We're a multi-billion-dollar project. It's a big endeavor. It takes a long time. You have to have people that can really think dynamically. When you have a position that said you're going to do A, B, and C, you're going to succeed, you're going to do all the rest of the alphabet and then some. And it really takes that type of person that kind of seek out the work rather than, okay, I've given them my task today, I'm going to do A, B, and C, I'm done. Those folks usually don't last too long, because they're kind of set for a regimented process where we're always dynamic. We hit a obstacle, we got to move around that obstacle. You got to think quickly and smartly about how you're doing that. And some people just aren't cut out for it, but the folks that are, they really excel. And like Rick was saying, then they get highly competitive, and people want to take them because consultants are seeing that, because we work with consultants hand in hand on these projects, and so the good staff are going to be taken elsewhere often.
Yeah, it's not hard to diagnose the problem. Then if you need really talented people to come in, and the timing may be short, right? So
right.
It actually does kind of go against the grain of, to your point, their very nature. So, Cory, over to you.
Yeah, I'll just note that as we're doing our oversight, these are challenges that we definitely encounter. We try to be flexible in performing that oversight and recognizing the restrictions that may just be inherent to the situation, to the agency, to that project, and what's down the road. But we do have some key requirements for these teams. And in our oversight, we always are trying to be helpful as much as we can. So we hire consultants. We have folks in our regional offices on the front lines that have a lot of experience overseeing major capital projects. And when there are these challenges with hiring or filling gaps or recruiting, we'll point that out in our oversight. But we'll also try to be helpful in terms of, here's a suggestion. Here's something that maybe a consultant that we have that's had a lot of experience in other places can bring to the table. But yeah, as you just said, Rob, I mean, it's an obvious issue that comes when you have great people. They're competitive. They can be easily recruited and pulled away, and it's a small pool. And as exciting as it is with what could be coming down the road with infrastructure investments and transit and other projects, that I'm afraid the challenge is only going to get more severe in some places.
Yeah, and it's not like the workforce shortage. I don't want to say shortage, but the workforce challenges that we're experiencing throughout the economy, but particularly in transportation, those supply chain issues on the West Coast are very prominent right now, but it's not like it's unique to transit. So not only do we have a problem just within this space, but it actually is something that is across the board. We're probably competing with transit in general too, or with transportation in general. I want to welcome Roger to the call. Thank you for joining. I know you had some scheduling challenges before, so let me jump in then to this question on the consultants. I think this is really interesting because projects have to happen whether there's staff or not. There's always, say always, but there's consultants as an option, right? So what are the challenges and I guess let's say what are the benefits and the drawbacks of relying an awful lot on consultants to do this kind of work? In our report, we found that some places believe they had more success when they could bring things in house. Madrid, for example, famously, they're almost evangelical about the need to bring things in house. But if that's not the reality, how do you manage these consultants in the long term? They're not to anybody who wants to jump in.
Well, I can go ahead.
Yeah, the time. This is not the reason I was late. I actually met with one of our major consultants this morning on that. We do here at MO on the aviation side. We used to be almost 100% consultant, and about 5-6 years ago, we brought most of it in house and it's a very small staff that we do it with, and we use consultants for some of the more technical things. Having said that, one of the discussions I had with one of our big consultants today is on the consultant community. We really need for them to be more forthright and open with the owner. That if because we're hiring them for their expertise and knowledge, whether it's project management or technical expertise, but what I ask them to do is to not be afraid to tell us if we're going down the wrong path. If we're allowing the contractor to maybe overwhelm us with RFIs, to tell us, hey, you really ought to reject a whole bunch of these because they're in the spec, quit sending them over to your A&E. Or if we take a position that's, that maybe we have a chance to win, but if we don't, it could drag the project out and the concepts more. And so what I've asked from the consulting community is, hey, please bring your expertise and don't be afraid to tell us if we're wrong or what the risks are and why those risks, and not just do what we ask you to do. If we ask you to do something that may not be the best way to do it, come back and tell us. Even if it's less money for them, I kind of tell them, hey, overall, you'll still make your money. But having said that, on our side, what I do with my staff is try to make them understand is we have to make decisions quickly. That the biggest complaint I hear from contractors all the time, and I think we all hear, is we need for you to make decisions. A no decision is a decision, and it's often a bad decision because it just drags it out. We need for you owners to make a decision. And so that's what I tell our folks is, hey, our main job is to run these things down and give them direction quickly. But also, like I said, for us too, and I tell my folks, but also don't be afraid to tell them it's already in the contract. We're going to reject this RFI, send it back, because your job is to understand the contract too and the specs. And so much of that I see that we allow the contractors to put the burden on us, and then they blame us for taking too long. And so what I'm trying to do is help our staff and our consultants to break that cycle. So,
do you find that's easier than when it's consultants or when it's in-house staff? We've heard this before, this ability to make decisions and make them quickly. That's facilitated when it's in-house, or is it better when it's outsourced?
Yeah, it all depends on both. In-house, if you have the right leadership structure and processes to get these things done, it works. But if but you can have the best process. If you don't have the right individual, it fails. Same with the consultants. You can have the biggest company, and they can do it. But if you get the wrong project manager on your project, it's not going to go well. So, it's really, you got to have somebody in the ownership side that can, at the leadership, that has the strength and knowledge to make this and see where the weaknesses are and replace people if needed sometimes. Because we do that, not because we like doing it, but we're not afraid to change out folks on our side or the consultant side. So.
Others want to jump in on that one?
I could add to that quite a bit. Consulting is, first I'll just say our structure, we rely on consultants. Consultants have to be part of our structure, and we have them in managing roles. We have them certainly on the design, engineer, record. We don't do that in-house. And so we cannot move forward. But kind of what Roger is saying, it really depends a lot on who's leading the show from the consultant side. I've had consultants where I've had someone kind of, really looking out for me, looking out for the agency, and being even having awareness on the political side. That is a huge advantage, but that's rare to have a consultant that really has that on their radar. Usually it's I don't want to, because I used to be a consultant myself, but consultants can be a little bit tone deaf when it comes to political matters, and these projects are fraught with political issues every day. And if you have a consultant that really doesn't comprehend that or know how to navigate it, it does make it a challenge. But it's a huge plus if the consultant does have that background. And I've had consultants where the project manager has kind of searched out and just kind of monitored things, maybe even beyond their realm, to just look out for the owner. And it's just extremely helpful. Where I've had other consultants where they're just kind of doing their thing. They'll do the design of whatever it is. Here's your plans, here's your spec, and I'll respond to the contractor according to my contract. And it's again, it goes back to being dynamic. To be able to succeed, I think you have to be dynamic to make these work fluidly as we navigate these projects.
Yeah, and I'll just add in quickly. I echo what Jim and Roger said. Some of our mega projects, our tunneling projects, we could have 100 people working on them. To me, it doesn't make sense to hire 100 agency people. The model that I've always used, and I think it's been successful, is that agency people in general are in the lead management positions, including project manager, with support from consultants. Consultants are needed sometimes because of the dynamics of the project. I've had to pick up the phone and say, I need somebody like tomorrow to start on this. Whereas, the hiring process for an agency, I always got great support from HR, but it could take 6 months. And on a dynamic project, things come up. That's just not going to work. So I would think consultants are really needed on the projects, but I would really emphasize that having a key role for agency staff. It gives also more credibility within the agency. We're working with other departments, we're working with operations, and even other jurisdictions, the cities. I think they prefer to work with staff, and that's it's just got to be the right balance.
Not I won't say necessary evil, but a necessary component, right, of all of this. And so probably a better thing to do is recognize that they're needed. And in the United States, maybe we're not going to do the Madrid model, but recognize that they're needed and figure out ways to do better management and oversight with internal staff, something like that. And
I would add,
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, from looking at a number of projects across the country, I think the example that Rick just provided is very common, because there are certain skill sets that are only needed for a short period of time, or a very specialized, very limited pool, that we see commonly filled with the consultant role on most of the projects FTA funds. And we don't have specific requirements for which positions should be agency staff versus consultants, but it does seem to be a best practice to have agency staff in those management roles. Another word I'll put out there is just that inherent ownership that the agency staff may take of the work, the pride of the work. I mean, we get that with the consultants too, but that's another benefit that I think agency staff can bring to the table when the agency is in a position to fill that role with someone in-house.
That's good. So, and you kind of got to my question I was going to ask you this. So when you evaluate capacity at these agencies, there's no guidance or metrics for split between consultants or in-house. It's whatever works best for the agency. I don't know if it words in your mouth, but something like that.
Yeah, it's flexible. We do rely on our consultants and what they've seen work well in other places or present challenges in places as they're doing that capacity review. And it does vary project by project. But I think most times the model we see is the one where agency staff are at least filling all those key management positions. And depending on the depth of the agency, the size of the capital programs, those technical skills, the amount of which they're filled by in-house versus consultant staff varies accordingly.
Just one comment. Filling the technical staff, it's a challenge, but it's, when we need technical staff, we have enough contracts for our consultants to fill those. And from my experience, it's really the leadership staff. The leadership, you got to have the right leader at the top if you want a successful project. That it doesn't necessarily. So in our case, like on a rail project, I'm not really looking for someone that has a lot of rail experience when they're at the top. As long as they have good construction experience on large projects, because when you really break it down, even on a rail project, it's just a lot of concrete and dirt and steel. Just like building a road, the automatic train control systems, those kind of things, those are just systems. But we install systems in buildings and airports. So I really look for the person at the top that can really has a track record of being able to make decisions, being able to organize things, and keep on top of things, and not specifically the top guys. The technical guys, I want the guy that built lots of railroads doing the design and those kind of things, automatic train control. But the top leadership, I think there's too much emphasis on trying to find someone with lots of experience on a specific type of project.
That's really interesting. And that's something we discovered in this work. And each of you actually, I think, have mentioned it or to some extent, that for transit agencies who may not have the routinization from that highway projects do, for example, they seem to have a much more streamlined approach to getting things done, right? Because it's not moving heaven and earth, because they've been doing these things all the time. We compared the transit project to a highway project in Northern Virginia, just to see how they treated these things. So, and you each kind of mentioned that there's something we can learn from the highway side, or sharing personnel or something like that. Is that something that is really novel, or is that something that happens all the time, this kind of cross-pollination between highways and transit for getting things done?
Well, for us in the Twin Cities here, we, like I indicated earlier, we rely quite a bit on the DOT. MnDOT staffing is integral to our process, or even more so on this project because there's more infrastructure we're involving there right away. But when it comes to acquisition of property, MnDOT plays a heavy role in that. But kind of what Roger was saying, I agree. You still want core agency people to be kind of running the show, so to speak. Because again, it's that if you have somebody on the outside, consultant, whoever, even another agency, they're not going to necessarily have that ownership or that political wherewithal to keep pushing these projects forward. But the DOT is very important in our area. So it transcends, because we're essentially building bridges in our case, and we also have track and utilities. It's a lot of the same stuff that highways deal with.
Yeah, I saw that clearly on the T-Rex project where CDOT basically did most of the right-of-way acquisition, a lot of the construction management. At RTD, we wanted our people and consultants to oversee the track and systems. But it was a good experience doing that. And I had a revelation in Los Angeles. We had a big dispute with a contractor on one of our projects on the scope of work for paving. You say, how could that have happened? Paving's pretty straightforward. Well, apparently not. And it was a big dollar amount. It was a big dispute. So finally, I went to the city of Los Angeles and said, can you do that paving work for it? We'll pay you. And we negotiated a price. That's their bread and butter. They do that every single day. They even had their own asphalt plant. And when they do it, they're going to do it to their standards as opposed to our contractor doing it and then having a dispute on whether it met their requirements or not. So they did it, and it was a great way to do it. And it got me thinking, well, maybe these future projects, instead of having the transit agency's contractor do things like paving, hire the city to do it. They're looking for the work to do. They know how to do it. So I think it's something that, and it's in the Eno report, to encourage things like this. But I just think sometimes stovepipe jurisdictional things get in the way of that too much, and it really should be explored a lot more.
Yeah, it seems intuitive. I don't know how easy it is in practice. Cory, is that something that you all look at the FTA when you think about capacity, or is that more episodic?
Yeah, I think it varies place by place. Yeah, I don't think we have any general feedback on that. We do see it. I can say for us, in terms of just hiring our project management oversight consultants every 5 years, we are always trying to find that right balance of how much emphasis we put on specific transit experience or rail experience. And for certain roles, it's critical as it relates to systems or vehicles or communications and whatnot. But there is recognition to some of the other points that were made, that just general project management, particularly like highway project management, is transferable. And so that is something that we think about, not only in overseeing projects, but just in hiring our own consultants to support our oversight efforts. And I feel like we kind of ebb and flow a little bit as to how much emphasis we put on transit for these points that they are transferable skills.
Yeah, and I guess it does depend on the place, right? In a place like New York, right, which is where the MTA or somebody just massive transit workers and construction workers, it may look different in the Twin Cities or other places, just because of the experience and the history there. Let me get a couple of questions. So we haven't really talked about compensation for the public sector staff, but in our work, we did uncover that there are caps and there are some kind of barriers when it comes to things like salary caps that make it difficult for public sector agencies to hire the qualified talent. We talked a little bit about the competition with consultants before. We saw that in Copenhagen, that they have created independent corporations so that they can kind of get beyond those caps and they can pay more money and kind of treat it more like a private sector business. Have you seen these kinds of governance issues serve as a barrier to bringing in-house talent? Are there just restrictions, artificial or not, that we can kind of start to loosen up to bring more talent into these agencies?
Well, I'll go ahead and start. I was kind of thinking about, Rick said 6 months to hire people. That's kind of the standard, and that's too long. It's but in our process, I don't know how we improve that, because we have to go through the advertisement, and then it has to go through a review, and then the interviews, maybe a second interview. It just compounds, and it's really hard to navigate, particularly as you're moving into construction. Things are happening, and it's hard to get positions filled. That's where we look to try to, bring internal folks up the ranks. Again, within our Met Council, maybe there's other people at the engineering facilities, for example, that may want to come over, or maybe it's temporarily using a county person. But just speaking for our agency, and it's not a nice thing to say, but we got a lot of bureaucracy to maneuver through to hire people. It's just it's cumbersome, and I'm not really sure how to get through that, because we have our process for the whole agency that we need to fit into, and that's maybe one of the problems we deal with, because we're kind of a one-off within a bigger organization.
Yeah, it is a problem. I've seen independent construction agencies. Seen them be successful. I've seen agencies be successful. So I think there's a right way to do both things, and it really depends on the city. My bias is towards trying to make a staffing agency be successful and go forward on that. That's what I have most experience. I think there's a lot of synergies when you work for an agency, and you can't underestimate the importance of working with the operations department. And I think, these are relationships that agency people build up over the years of being able to work together with the various departments. And I think that's sometimes when it's an independent construction agency, it sometimes seems like it can be a us versus them thing. And sometimes it is even when you're within the agency. I'm not going to say we always saw eye to eye, but like I said, there's been relationships that have been built up with people over the years. And ultimately, there's a general manager, if there is a fundamental disagreement, who can make a decision. And that general manager of the agency is so important. When an agency decides to do a mega rail project, they're going to be a different agency. They're not going to be a bus operations agency anymore. And you can't say, well, why are those construction people making so much more than our bus people? Well, it's fundamentally different jobs, and it takes a CEO who has the vision to see that we're taking on this major thing. It's a major risk to our agency. And if I don't give the right resources and support to this function, it's not going to be successful. And sometimes that's hard for CEOs to do, because, an operational agency, the goal is to make operate the same every day, get the buses, the trains out at a certain time, have them perform there's nothing the same every day in construction. And I've been fortunate over my career. For many years, I worked for Phil Washington, who was the CEO at RTD and in LA. And Phil, while he wasn't a construction person by background, he understood it. He was comfortable engaging with various contractors and executives, and he would provide the resources and the decision making that I needed to support that. And if it was an independent agency, not sure I would have gotten that. Again, there's a lot of synergies. There's things, when we go to open the lines, we have to do so many cutovers when we're interfacing with the existing line. That means shutting down service on major lines for, entire weekends, sometimes even weeks during the weekday. And I just think those things are better accomplished when the project is being run by an agency person.
I wanted to add, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good, please.
Well, I wanted to add what Rick said, kind of triggered a couple of things in my mind. What we've done on the system side is we partnered with our operations folks to get those individuals that will be managing the traction power, for example, and they're now inspectors on our project. So we, and I can't say enough about that, because you have people that are going to be working with this thing long term, and they're helping with the not only the design but the build of it. And that's huge. just to have that. But it also takes some flexibility, and kind of what Rick was talking about, the general manager. Fully agree. You got to have that buy-in at the top. Our organization, just be frank, I don't know if we're a bus and rail organization, and even bigger with the Met Council, that handles more things within the area. It's difficult if you don't think that you're just an individual construction project, that it does have special needs. And you're right, Rick. You need to think about how you're compensating people on these type of projects versus others, because it is different. And we, unfortunately, I think we look at across the board, we have equity, within the whole organization. So, I think there would be a huge advantage if the agency was to have that foresight to think about specifically for a big project's coming up, that's going to be kind of a one-off for that agency, and they treat it differently. I think that would go a long ways. But the linkage with operations is very important. Very important, because you have that buy-in from the beginning, and as you get into pre-rev and all that good stuff, the testing, and get into operations.
Yeah, and I'll just add a little bit of emphasis there. We see both models. We do have a handful or so of projects around the country right now that FTA is helping fund that are being built by an independent entity, a different organization than who's going to ultimately own and operate. And that can work. We've had success there, but and it could bring some benefits, like being able to be more competitive in hiring and building a dynamic team for a more short duration. But we have also had some challenges in that area, and as we are always looking to improve the way we estimate cost, for honesty with the public about what we think these projects are going to cost, that is a risk consideration that we have to factor in, just based on some of those challenges that can come forward when you don't have the construction arm and the operations arm answering to the same CEO, or maybe something's just lost in that whole life cycle consideration of the operations and maintenance of the system when it's a different entity. So not to say that it can't happen, but it has presented challenges in the past, and from that we've had to adjust our risk process some accordingly.
So I just want to make a comment on that, since we're an airports authority building a rail system for a totally different agency. Has it been challenging? Yes. But as I tell my boss, even on the aviation side, what my office builds, we don't own and operate any of it. If we're building something, it's for the airlines, it's for FAA, TSA. It's really not much different, because my office doesn't operate anything. We only build and construct it for somebody else. And that's typical of even in a transit agency that had the construction arm. There's always going to be challenges. And again, it's that leadership of building that relationship with the operational side of connecting. Because like I said, even on the aviation side, when we're building for FAA and TSA, they're not paying for it. We pay for it, the airport pay for it, and the airlines. So a lot of those things, we have the same typical challenges, but we have to build those relationships. As far as pay, because we're an authority, we do have more flexibility to do that. But I think sometimes we get too concerned that it's, and forget, construction people really don't operate anything. And we're building it for somebody else, and it's easy for them to ask for things. And we have to have the processes and the leadership to help them work through those things and find the best solution for both sides. So
that's really interesting. It's interesting to hear the different perspectives. And when we do the work, or we've been doing our work at Eno, it seems natural that we kind of move into this space of, well, if it doesn't work in this model, let's just create a whole different kind of governance structure. And it's good advice that sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but you got to manage it either way. And there's a question that's come in that I believe is related. We had folks from Spur in San Francisco on earlier this week. They're doing similar work, and they recommend in the San Francisco Bay Area for some kind of regional project delivery vehicle that, I guess because there is so much fragmentation in that region, 12 or 13 different transit agencies, that would kind of lend people to different projects across the region, but that are all kind of similar, under some transit umbrella. Is that something that would work, you think, or is there? How do you think about a recommendation like that?
Well, I think it should be looked into. Los Angeles, Southern California could be similar because there's so many projects going on, airport projects, roadway projects, transit projects, high-speed rail, you name it. I do think it's something that should be looked into. We have a city of Inglewood, is building a $1 billion people mover. So they reached out to Metro and said, "Can you support us on this? We've never built anything like that." And of course, we had concerns because we have a lot on our plate ourselves. But I think that's a move in the right direction, is to start thinking about, what can be done. The airport is building a people mover. Well, Metro, knows things about that. We have our interfaces, of course. So we're building the station to our rail line. And I think maybe looking at taking it a step further, there are institutional things to overcome. I mentioned, turning it over to the operations department. Again, I feel it's easier and it's more smooth if the operations department and the construction department are the same agency, because there's mechanisms to decide things and get things done and accept it. But I think, if it really looked into, I think the structures can be put in place to address those kinds of things. So I'm not saying it's the answer, but it's something that, again, should be looked at. It would help smooth out work. If one agency is slow for so many years, they could work on another agency's projects. And, it's got a lot of potential, I think.
Right. And so from my experience, coming from the military, you have the Army Corps and the Naval Facilities as your in command. That's essentially what they are. They're the construction agencies, not only for the military, but they also do it for other federal agencies. And again, they have to work with multiple clients and operators that the Army Corps or NAVFAC, they don't operate anything. And so they have to work with multiple agencies, from education to everybody from nuclear guys and weapons folks, to be able to understand their requirements and turn over the operation. So that model works. They've been doing it a long time, but there's a lot of processes in place that you're going to need for those centralized agencies, and it works. But again, it comes down to getting the right team. Sometimes it works really good with the same office, and if you have the wrong person, sometimes it doesn't work quite as well as it should.
So in the Twin Cities, I mentioned we partner with the DOT quite a bit, and so we actually do this. But being a medium-sized market, they're often booked up. Like right now, we could use resources to help us because we have some folks leaving. So go to MnDOT. Well, we're busy because there's just only so many people to go around these projects in our environment. That's one of the things we struggle with. But yeah, highly endorsed when you can do it. Definitely, if you can have a multi-agency approach to borrow, and that's key, because particularly when resources are a challenge.
Yeah, certainly agencies that are relatively less fragmented, like yours, it may not be as appealing as in San Francisco, Los Angeles, or a place that's with many, many different operators, many, many different buildings. Here's a question that's come in around something we were talking about earlier before. Do you have ideas for training strategies for training in-house staff as they're working with side by side with consultants? It's, as we kind of talked about, it is different cultures, right? Different expertise and everything, but we just assume in some cases, oh, they're just going to work together. But I think clearly training would help. Are there strategies that you all could recommend for how in-house staff and consultants can work together?
Well, I could start. I think one thing that could be very valuable if you have the opportunity, get somebody in another project office and so they can learn the ropes. We had that with several years ago with a soon-to-be project director, and he was sitting in with us at our project management team meetings to understand the dynamics of what we're doing. And I think that helps get someone acquainted with how we go about doing business, because work in a project office where you got the consultant in-house, most of them anyway, there's going to be all over the place, but it's just a different dynamic where it's almost like a kid in a candy store where you got to be kind of be able to regulate yourself to not go to the candy jar too often, but very valuable to have see that dynamic and how that works, because it is different from the conventional, a bridge project for, say, that someone, you have a consultant off in their office and you have your own agency in their office.
Yeah, I sometimes look back on my calendar when I was a project manager, and I could start the day having a meeting on some technical issue. Okay, most people who do this have an engineering background, so as something we're somewhat comfortable with, although the technical issues are often lead to cost and schedule issues, which are lose-lose decisions to make. So you do that, then you may have a meeting to go over your project budget status. Then you may go into a meeting to negotiate a challenging change order with a tough contractor. You might then have a meeting with one of your board members or board members' staff who has a concern or a problem or an issue. And then you could have a meeting with the art people on your project. And then you top it off at night, presenting to a city council where people are concerned about the impacts of your project. So it's all over the place. And you really, when you're a project manager, you have to have an aptitude for so many different things. I found the things that I like to do, I rarely worked on when I was a project manager. I had to spend all my time on things that probably I didn't like so much. And that's what the training is important, because where we come into this, we do so many different things. It's not like you go over to your drafting board and you figure out this technical thing. It's so much more than engineering. Engineering is fundamental to it all. But, where in college did I ever learn to present to a city council? Never. It's just something you have to pick up. And I think there's two aspects of training. At Metro, we realized that, and we even started sending some of our project managers to a program that was put on by the Harvard Business School. It wasn't about project management. It wasn't about technical things. It was about how to be a leader and a manager. And the other thing, and this is something that I find truly rewarding, on these mega projects, Jim said earlier, it takes a certain type of person to work on these projects. And you really see the talent come to the fore. If they're young people, they're go-getters, they just want to take on more and more. I remember a young person we had, and a change order came up, and we said, guess what? You're going to lead us in negotiating it. And he's like, oh, that's not, I can't. Well, he did it. And now he's managed mega projects later in his career. And it's really rewarding to see that. And that's probably how I came up. When I was at Dallas, I saw what was being done, not only in my area, but in the project as a whole. And I do think, I know at LA Metro, there's a pipeline of people who can come up, and they are advancing, they're getting promoted. Some have become project managers. The same thing happened at RTD in Denver. When I came to Denver, there was projects they had just completed on time, on budget. I used the core of that team as the core of my people on T-Rex. And that is encouraging, and it's really important as leaders that we do encourage our people, bring them into things, bring a construction manager into a budget meeting so they know what goes into establishing and managing and keeping track of a budget. That's so important. And if they learn those skills, a lot of what we're dealing with, I think, can be addressed.
Yeah, and two great examples, LA and Denver, massive construction programs that have gone on too. It's hope those lessons do replicate throughout the country, especially as somebody mentioned, I think Cory earlier, that we might have a whole lot of new construction going on in this country. Depends on what happens here in federal Washington. So I could keep talking about this all day. This is the challenge with these virtual calls. We do have to end them on time. So I want to thank you all very much for taking the time to participate with this with me and with Eno. A lot of great issues that were brought up. This whole issue of setting up this two-tiered system for construction and operations to avoid that, and just these linkages with operations is something I hadn't thought about before. But just a lot of really good insights that were brought up here today. I hope folks got a lot out of it. So Cory, Jim, Roger, and Rick, thank you so much for joining us today. As I noted, this conversation will be recorded, so folks who are signed into the symposium can access these at any time. We are now going to go into an optional networking session. I do encourage you to join if you can. So again, gentlemen, thank you all so much, and much more to come on this. Have a great day.
Thank you.